C.S. Lewis profoundly observed, we must lay before him what is in us, not what ought to be in us. This simple yet powerful truth touches on a profound struggle many of us face daily, the tension between who we are and who we long to be. Have you ever felt the weight of uncertainty, standing at the crossroads between self-reliance and the deep yearning to fully trust in God? Each morning, as we awaken to the new day, we are confronted with this critical choice to cling to our own understanding or to surrender ourselves to the infinite wisdom and love of Christ. This decision is not merely about choosing a path, it's about addressing the deep-seated fears and desires that reside within us. It's in these quiet moments, when we feel the pull of our insecurities, doubts, and pain, that we must ask ourselves, what would it mean to truly trust God with everything? To let go of the need to control every aspect of our lives and instead place our lives entirely in His hands. True spiritual growth begins when we acknowledge our limitations, when we cease trying to mold ourselves into something we think we should be, and instead allow Christ to shape us through His grace. This is the core of the Christian journey, a journey that requires us to step out in faith, not knowing what lies ahead, but believing in the one who walks with us. It is through this surrender that we experience the profound peace that only comes from God, a peace that surpasses all understanding, even when the storms of life threaten to overwhelm us. The truth is, life's greatest transformations often happen when we are at our most vulnerable, when we dare to trust in God's plan rather than our own. As we delve deeper into this message, I invite you to reflect on the areas of your life where you struggle to let go, where fear and doubt still have a grip on your heart. Consider how embracing this daily act of surrender can bring not only relief from your burdens but also a profound sense of purpose and peace. Stay with us as we explore together how this trust in Christ can transform your life, bringing you closer to the fulfillment and joy that your soul longs for. Before we move forward, I encourage you to engage with this message, like this post if it resonates with you, and share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can support and uplift one another on this journey of faith. Can I hear a hallelujah from you? In this era dominated by technology, where we often seek refuge behind firewalls and encrypted networks, there lies a deeper question: what truly safeguards our souls in a world brimming with unseen dangers? C.S. Lewis, in his profound reflections, frequently asked us to consider the nature of true security. He warned that our reliance on earthly defenses can sometimes distract us from the ultimate protector. Have we perhaps grown so accustomed to digital shields that we forget the invincible shield offered by God Himself? Psalm 27 doesn't just speak of protection, it immerses us in the reality of a God who is not only omnipresent but intimately involved in our struggles, just as Lewis emphasized the personal nature of our relationship with the divine. He often reminded us that our battles are not merely against flesh and blood, but against the powers of this dark world. Ephesians 6 verse 12. Yet, how often do we turn to our technological fortresses instead of seeking refuge in the eternal fortress of God's love and mercy? Lewis's wisdom invites us to question, what would it mean to live as though God is our fortress, not just in theory but in every breath, every choice? When we face fear, do we retreat into our digital worlds, or do we stand firm knowing that our God is a fortress that cannot be shaken? Psalm 27 presents 3 life-altering truths about God's protection that Lewis would urge us to ponder deeply. These truths not only promise safety but invite us to experience God as our personal shield, one that no earthly technology can rival. As we explore these principles together, let's open our hearts to the profound truth that God's presence is our greatest security. Join me in a prayer that not only seeks divine protection, but also a deeper awareness of God's enduring presence in every aspect of our lives. As C.S. Lewis might say, look for Christ and you will find Him, and with Him, everything else thrown in. Imagine for a moment standing at the edge of a deep, dark forest where the shadows seem to have a life of their own, twisting and turning, threatening to overwhelm you. It's a place where fear naturally takes hold, where uncertainty about what lies ahead can paralyze you. But what if, as you prepare to step forward, you are handed a light that not only brightens your path but also dispels every shadow around you? This is the profound assurance that Psalm 27 offers, a divine light that not only guides, but also protects, banishing every fear and doubt. C.S. Lewis, in The Problem of Pain, speaks to this very human experience of grappling with fear and the unknown. He writes, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Lewis understood that our deepest fears often emerge in our darkest moments, yet it is precisely in these moments that God's presence becomes most palpable. Just as the psalmist declares, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" This light isn't just a beacon, but an active force that chases away every encroaching threat. Have you ever felt that grip of anxiety that seems unshakable? That inner voice that questions your worth, your safety, your future? C.S. Lewis would urge us to consider these fears as opportunities to deepen our trust in God, to allow His strength to fill the gaps where our own strength fails. He suggests that, in recognizing our limitations, we open the door for God's infinite power to work through us. Psalm 27 is more than a reassurance, it is a call to trust in a God who doesn't merely observe from a distance, but actively engages in the battle on our behalf. With the Lord as your strength, as the very foundation of your life, what room is there left for fear? Anxiety, with all its consuming power, dissolves in the light of His certainty. Like Lewis reminds us, it's in our surrender to God's protection that we find true freedom. Thus, the psalmist's confidence isn't born out of ignorance of life's dangers, but from the unshakable conviction that God's light is stronger than any darkness we face. Dear friends in faith, let's take a moment to immerse ourselves in the profound message of Psalm 27, which offers a divine blueprint for establishing a protective spiritual barrier in our lives. As we navigate through this passage, we uncover the foundation of unwavering confidence, a confidence that is not born from our human capabilities, but from a deep-rooted trust in God's character and His unfailing promises. C.S. Lewis, in his reflections, often spoke of the weight of glory, a concept that resonates with the psalmist's declaration. Have we truly grasped the weight of God's glory in our lives? How often do we pause to reflect on the magnitude of God's presence as our light, our salvation, and our strength? Psalm 27 begins with a striking affirmation, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" The Lord is the strength of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? These words are not just poetic expressions, but profound truths that anchor our souls. Lewis once asked, "Isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes, but when you look back, everything is different?" This perspective invites us to consider how God's light subtly transforms our lives over time, guiding us even when we cannot immediately perceive it. The psalmist's rhetorical questions, "Whom shall I fear?" and "Of whom shall I be afraid?" are not mere inquiries but bold proclamations of a heart fortified by faith. Lewis also spoke of the inner battle between our desires and divine will, a struggle that mirrors the psalmist's reliance on God's strength. When we acknowledge the Lord as our strength, we surrender our fears and anxieties, recognizing that our human frailties are met with divine power. Have we allowed God's strength to become the cornerstone of our lives? The psalmist's depiction of God as our light, salvation, and strength challenges us to examine where we place our trust. In times of darkness and uncertainty, do we rely on our own understanding, or do we turn to the one who illuminates our path and secures our future? By contemplating these questions and drawing from the wisdom of both Scripture and Lewis's insights, we are invited to deepen our faith and embrace the truth that with God as our protector and guide, fear has no place in our lives. The confidence we seek is not self-made but divinely inspired, leading us to a life marked by trust and peace in the face of any challenge. In a world filled with uncertainties, how do we cultivate a faith that remains unshaken by life's storms? This question resonates deeply within us, especially when we face trials that test the very core of our beliefs. C.S. Lewis once pondered a similar thought when he wrote, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us, we are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." This statement challenges us to consider, is our faith truly anchored in who God is, or in what He might do for us? The psalmist in Psalm 27 offers a profound insight into this question. His desire is not for temporal comforts or material gain, but for something far greater, an intimate communion with God. He declares, "One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in His temple." This is not a request for protection from adversity or a life free of pain, but rather a yearning to be in God's presence, to experience His beauty and wisdom. Lewis, in his reflections on faith and pain, often emphasized that the purpose of our faith is not to shield us from suffering, but to transform our understanding of it. He famously said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. The psalmist's unwavering confidence in God is a testament to this transformative power. It teaches us that true faith is not about escaping the difficulties of life, but about finding peace in the midst of them through a deep, personal relationship with God. When we, like the psalmist, make God the central focus of our lives, we begin to see our challenges in a different light. Our faith becomes less about asking God to change our circumstances and more about allowing him to change us. We start to understand that the true measure of faith is not found in what we receive from God, but in how closely we walk with him. As Lewis would suggest, this walk often leads us through valleys of pain and uncertainty, but it is in these valleys that our faith grows strongest. In essence, the psalmist's prayer is not just a request but a declaration of priority. He seeks not the gifts of God but God himself. This is where unshakable faith is born, in the desire to know God more deeply, to experience his presence daily, and to trust in his wisdom above all else. When we align our hearts with this desire, everything else, our fears, our doubts, our struggles, begins to fade in the overwhelming light of his glory and grace. As C.S. Lewis aptly put it, aim at heaven and you will get earth, thrown in aim at earth and you will get neither. The pursuit of God is the pursuit of true faith, and in that pursuit we find everything we truly need. In our journey through life, we often encounter trials that shake us to our core, leaving us questioning the very foundations of our beliefs. C.S. Lewis profoundly captured this struggle when he described faith as the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods. But what does this truly mean for us, especially when our emotions, which can be as unpredictable as the sea, begin to challenge our once steadfast convictions? Lewis's insight invites us to reflect deeply. How often do we find ourselves tempted to abandon our faith when circumstances shift? When the warmth of our initial belief seems to fade in the cold light of new challenges? This tension is not new, nor is it unique to our personal experiences. The psalmist in Psalm 27 offers a timeless example of this battle between faith and fear. He writes with a heart that knows danger, yet boldly declares, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" It's not that the psalmist is oblivious to the threats around him, far from it. Rather, he chooses to focus on the unwavering presence of God, allowing that truth to overshadow his fears. This is the essence of enduring faith, not a denial of reality, but a deliberate choice to place God's promises above the loud clamor of our anxieties. Philippians 4 verse 6 provides us with a practical application of this principle. We are instructed to be anxious for nothing, a command that seems almost impossible in a world rife with reasons to worry. Yet the verse continues, urging us to present our concerns to God through prayer and supplication, coupled with thanksgiving. This is not a passive resignation, but an active exchange, trading our worries for the peace that comes from trusting in God's goodness and sovereignty. Lewis might ask us here, are we truly embracing this practice, or do we allow our prayers to be mere wishful thinking rather than a profound expression of trust in God's ability to sustain us? When we examine these scriptures and Lewis's insights together, a profound question emerges in the face of life's inevitable uncertainties. Will we let our changing emotions dictate our faith, or will we anchor ourselves in the unchanging truth of God's presence? The choice to trust, even when fear whispers otherwise, is not just a matter of willpower but of deeply rooting ourselves in the knowledge of who God is. This is the faith that endures, a faith that, like the psalmist, sees the danger but chooses to declare God's goodness louder still. My dear friends, consider for a moment the true nature of faith. It's not a gift reserved only for the towering figures of the Bible or the saints we often revere. Instead, it's a quiet strength accessible to each of us, regardless of where we stand in life. The journey of faith begins with a simple yet profound choice to divert our gaze from the overwhelming challenges before us, and instead fix it on the one who provides. It's a shift from dwelling on our fears to resting in the embrace of our Father. But what does this really mean for you, in the depth of your struggles? How do you shift your perspective when the weight of your burdens seems too heavy to bear? C.S. Lewis, in his candid reflections on the Christian walk, reminds us that the main thing we learn from a serious attempt to practice the Christian virtues is that we fail. This realization can be daunting, but it's also deeply liberating. Lewis points out that our failures, rather than disqualifying us, actually highlight the source of our true strength, God himself. The essence of faith, then, is not about our ability to succeed in every trial, but about recognizing our utter dependence on the one who never fails. In the Psalms, we see this echoed when the psalmist proclaims, "Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear, though war arise against me. In this I will be confident." This confidence doesn't stem from an absence of threats or difficulties, but from an unshakable trust in God's sustaining power. Can you, in your moments of fear and uncertainty, find the courage to trust in God's hands, holding you steady? The invitation of faith is not to ignore the hardships, but to see them through the lens of God's eternal presence and unwavering strength. This is where true, unshakable faith is forged, not in the absence of trouble, but in the steadfast belief that God is with us in every trial, offering a peace that surpasses understanding. Consider the moments when life feels overwhelming and you're searching for a place of safety and peace. Where do you turn when the storms of life rage? In these times, we are called to remember the profound truth found in Psalm 27, which offers us an image of God as our unwavering refuge. C.S. Lewis once said, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." This quote challenges us to reflect on how we perceive our struggles and where we seek solace. Lewis, known for his deep insights into the human soul, understood that true faith isn't merely a passive belief but an active pursuit of God, especially in times of trouble. He recognized that our pain can be a pathway to deeper faith, driving us to seek refuge in God's presence. Have you ever pondered why our most desperate moments often bring us closer to God? It's because, in our vulnerability, we become more attuned to His voice, more aware of our need for His protection. Psalm 27 verse 5 reveals a beautiful promise for in the time of trouble. "He shall hide me in his pavilion in the secret place of his tabernacle. He shall hide me, he shall set me high upon a rock." This is not just about seeking shelter, it's about entering into a deep, intimate relationship with God. The pavilion and tabernacle mentioned here are not merely structures, they represent the very presence of God, a sanctuary that offers both protection and peace. Lewis would argue that this divine shelter is where we find our true identity and purpose. When we are hidden in God's presence, we are not just escaping the chaos of the world, we are being elevated to a place where we can see our lives from His perspective. Have you ever considered that God's protection is not just about shielding you from harm, but also about giving you a new vision for your life? Being set upon a rock signifies more than safety, it represents a firm foundation, a place of unshakable security where you can stand with confidence, no matter the challenges you face. So, how do you cultivate this kind of faith? It begins with making God the center of your life, not just in moments of crisis, but in every aspect of your daily walk. Spend time in His presence, meditate on His word, and let His truth shape your perspective. As you do, you will find that the confidence within you grows, a confidence that is rooted in the knowledge that you are not alone, that you are protected, and that you are loved by a God who not only stands by your side, but lifts you up above your troubles. In the end, the pursuit of God is not just about seeking refuge, it is about finding a new way to see the world, a way that is informed by His love, His power, and His promise to always be our shelter in the storm. My dear friends, imagine a life where faith isn't just a fleeting feeling but a steadfast practice that anchors your soul in times of uncertainty. How often do we find ourselves shaken by the storms of life, wondering where to find refuge? C.S. Lewis once remarked, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted. In spite of your changing moods," this profound insight invites us to consider faith not merely as a belief, but as a deliberate and ongoing pursuit, much like the psalmist's journey in Psalm 27. Have you ever pondered why the psalmist portrays God as both a refuge and a fortress? In a world teeming with unpredictability and fear, it's no wonder we seek something solid to cling to. Psalm 27 verse 5 paints a vivid picture of divine protection for in the time of trouble. "He shall hide me in his pavilion in the secret place of his tabernacle. He shall hide me, he shall set me high upon a rock." This isn't just a promise of safety, but a powerful image of God lifting us above the fray, placing us on a secure foundation when everything else crumbles. Lewis, with his keen understanding of the human condition, suggests that faith must be cultivated intentionally. He argues that our moods are like waves, constantly shifting, but true faith is the bedrock that remains firm beneath those waves. Just as the psalmist seeks solace in God's presence, Lewis encourages us to practice our faith daily, to meditate on God's truths, and to remind ourselves of His promises. But how do we build this unshakable faith? The answer lies in seeking God's face, as urged in Psalm 27 verse 8 when you said, "Seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, Lord, I will seek." This seeking is more than a mere glance, it is an earnest pursuit of God's presence, an active decision to dwell in His holy space. It's in this pursuit that we find the confidence to stand firm, no matter the trials we face. So I urge you to make this practice of faith your daily mission. Spend time in God's presence, immerse yourself in His word, and let His truths take root in your heart. Like Lewis and the psalmist, may we all cultivate a faith that not only survives the storms but grows stronger because of them. In doing so, we'll discover a refuge that not only protects but empowers, lifting us high upon the rock of God's unwavering love. When life's storms rage and shadows loom, we often ask ourselves, where is God in this chaos? It's a question that resonates deeply, especially when we find ourselves in the depths of despair. C.S. Lewis once reflected on the nature of pain, calling it God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. In his view, suffering is not a sign of abandonment but a wake-up call, urging us to turn our hearts back to the divine. Nahum 1 verse 7 reassures us that the Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who trust in Him. This isn't just a comforting phrase, it's a promise of God's enduring presence and protection. But what does it truly mean for God to be our stronghold? Imagine a fortress, impenetrable and steadfast, a place of refuge where fear cannot reach us. This is what God offers to those who place their trust in Him, a sanctuary in the midst of life's fiercest battles. Yet, as C.S. Lewis pointed out, God's protection doesn't mean the absence of trials. The psalmist echoes this sentiment, acknowledging the existence of enemies and false witnesses, forces that seek to undermine our faith. But even as these challenges rise, the psalmist clings to hope, declaring in Psalm 27 verse 13, "I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." Here, we see a profound truth. Belief in God's goodness is not a passive act, it's an active, courageous choice. In the works of C.S. Lewis, particularly in The Problem of Pain, he reminds us that God's goodness is not always immediately apparent in our struggles. However, it is precisely in these moments of darkness that our faith is tested and refined. Lewis writes, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world." So when we face our darkest moments, we must ask ourselves, do we believe in the goodness of the Lord? Can we, like the psalmist, hold on to the hope that God's goodness will manifest, not in some distant future, but here and now, in our present struggles? This belief is not just a fleeting thought, but a conviction that sustains us, a light that guides us through the shadows, reminding us that God's stronghold is not merely a distant promise, but a tangible reality in our lives. In the journey of faith, C.S. Lewis illuminates a profound truth that often goes unnoticed until we confront our limitations. True faith is born when we acknowledge that our efforts, no matter how fervent, fall short without the grace of God. Have you ever found yourself striving relentlessly, only to feel the sting of inadequacy? This is where Lewis's wisdom penetrates our hearts. Our hope must not rest in the frailty of human endeavor, but in the unwavering strength of God's grace. Lewis paints hope not as a fleeting emotion, but as an anchor for the soul, steadying us amidst the turmoil of life. When the world around us begins to shake and crumble, do we truly believe that God's goodness will prevail? This is a question that beckons us to look deeper, beyond the surface of our struggles, and to place our trust in a plan far greater than our understanding. Lewis challenges us to reflect on how we can nurture such resilient hope. It is a hope that does not falter even when the path ahead is obscured, when God's methods and timing seem elusive. How often do we find ourselves questioning His ways, especially in the midst of trials? Yet, Lewis reminds us that the essence of spiritual maturity lies in this very struggle to trust in God's plan even when we cannot see the outcome. As we attempt to live out Christian virtues, stumbling along the way, we begin to understand that the only real option is to surrender completely into God's hands. This surrender is not a sign of defeat, but of profound courage. It is the courage to face adversity with the knowledge that our strength is not our own but flows from a divine source. Lewis underscores the importance of cultivating the habit of faith, a discipline that goes beyond mere belief and enters the realm of practiced trust. Have we truly trained ourselves in this habit? In waiting on the Lord, Lewis suggests, we are not simply marking time, we are actively growing, maturing, and deepening our relationship with Him. Every moment of waiting becomes an opportunity for spiritual growth, a step closer to understanding that our strength, our hope, and indeed our very lives are anchored not in ourselves, but in the boundless grace of God. This perspective shifts the narrative of our lives from one of self-reliance to one of divine reliance, a journey where the ultimate victory is not ours, but God's. Dove. A victory that redefines our understanding of strength, hope, and spiritual maturity. So, as Lewis asks, how will we respond to this call to deeper faith? Will we let go of our need to control and trust in the unfolding of God's perfect plan? The answer, Lewis implies, is found in the daily practice of faith, a practice that anchors us firmly in the grace and goodness of God, even as the world around us seems to fall apart. In the midst of life's trials, have you ever paused to consider that these moments of pain might be more than mere obstacles? What if, instead, they are divine invitations to step into a deeper communion with God, where His refuge becomes not just a hiding place but a transformative encounter? C.S. Lewis once posed the question, what if suffering is not God's way of pushing us away, but His way of pulling us closer? This perspective shifts our focus from the struggle itself to the presence of God within it. Consider the profound peace that comes when we surrender our burdens to Christ, trusting not in our own strength but in His transformative power. Lewis eloquently describes this trust as the process by which Christ reshapes us into His likeness, filling us with a peace that is beyond human understanding. But this peace is not passive, it requires an active pursuit of God's presence, especially in our darkest moments. When the waves of difficulty threaten to overwhelm you, what is your first instinct? Do you attempt to navigate the storm on your own, or do you run to the shelter of God's presence? Lewis invites us to see God's refuge as more than just a place of protection. It is a space where we are enveloped in His love, quieted by His tender care, and lifted by His joy. This is not merely a theoretical idea but a lived experience, as captured in Zephaniah 3 verse 17, "The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you in His love. He will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." In these sacred moments of refuge, we do not only find safety from life's storms, we discover the profound reality of being cherished by God. His presence becomes a sanctuary where we are not only protected but also deeply valued and loved. The challenges we face, then, are not just battles to be fought but opportunities to experience the depth of God's love in ways we might never have imagined. So, the next time you are faced with tribulation, ask yourself, am I merely enduring this, or am I embracing the opportunity to draw nearer to God's heart? C.S. Lewis, in his profound exploration of faith, emphasizes that our journey with God is less about our striving and more about surrendering to the work He is already doing within us. This shift in focus from our efforts to His grace transforms the way we approach life's challenges. Have you ever found yourself burdened by the need to earn God's favor through your actions? Lewis reminds us that when we are aligned with God's will, our actions flow naturally from the divine presence within, freeing us from the anxiety of self-reliance. In Mere Christianity, Lewis states, the real problem of the Christian life comes where people do not usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. How often do we wake up already worried about the day ahead, thinking of all the tasks we must accomplish to stay on God's path? Yet, Lewis suggests that the real challenge is in surrendering these worries and letting God take the lead from the very first moments of our day. This leads us to the heart of prayer, as Psalm 27 so beautifully illustrates. The psalmist's words, "Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me, and answer me," are not mere requests but an outpouring of a soul deeply yearning for God's presence. This is not a casual or routine prayer but a fervent plea, reflecting the desperation we often feel in times of trouble. Have you ever cried out to God with such intensity, feeling as though your very soul is at stake? When we consider the depth of C.S. Lewis's writings, it's clear that he invites us to explore prayer not just as a form of communication, but as a transformative experience that aligns our hearts with God's will. Lewis often argued that true prayer is not about changing God's mind, but about allowing God to change ours. He famously said, "We must lay before Him what is in us, not what ought to be in us," emphasizing the importance of approaching God with raw honesty. But have you ever paused to consider the power in this act of vulnerability? What happens within us when we bring our unfiltered selves before God, exposing our fears, hopes, and doubts? In Psalm 27 verse 11, the psalmist's plea, "Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me in a smooth path because of my enemies," is not just a cry for protection, but a deep desire for divine wisdom and guidance. This echoes Lewis's reflection that the journey of faith is less about self-sufficiency and more about recognizing our profound need for God. How often do we, in our moments of prayer, seek more than just answers to our problems? Do we yearn for a deeper connection with the divine, or are we content with simply receiving what we ask for? Lewis challenges us to see prayer as an opportunity for growth, not just as a means to an end. He reminds us that persistent prayer, like the widow's unremitting petitions in Luke 18, is not really about obtaining what we desire, but about cultivating a relationship with God and rooted in Christ. This parallel isn't just about persistence, it's about the transformative nature of continuous prayer. When we pray with the same persistence and faith as before, we shift our focus from our immediate needs to God's eternal wisdom. This is the heart of Lewis's message. True prayer transforms us, making us more attuned to God's presence in our lives. Paul's exhortation in Philippians 4 verse 6 to 7, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving." Requests being made known to God gives a profound insight into the nature of prayer. He speaks of a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that comes not from the absence of trouble but from the presence of God. This peace is a divine gift, one that fortifies our hearts and minds through Christ. But how do we attain this peace? Lewis suggests that it begins with a willingness to approach God with complete honesty, laying bare our innermost thoughts and fears. As we reflect on Lewis's teachings, we are invited to examine our own prayer lives. Are our prayers mere petitions for intervention, or do they reflect a genuine desire to align our will with God's? Are we seeking to know God more intimately, or are we simply seeking solutions to our problems? Lewis would encourage us to view prayer as an end in itself, a sacred act that brings us into the presence of God, where we find not only answers but also peace and purpose. In this light, persistent prayer becomes more than just a spiritual discipline, it becomes a way of life. It is about cultivating a heart that is constantly attuned to God's voice, even in the midst of life's challenges. It is about embracing the peace that Paul describes, a peace that is not dependent on our circumstances, but on our relationship with God. And as we continue in prayer, we may not always receive the answers we expect, but we will receive something far greater, the assurance that we are held in the loving hands of God. So, let us approach prayer with the same persistence as the widow, not out of desperation, but out of a deep-seated trust in God's goodness. Let our prayers be shaped by a desire to know Him more intimately, to seek His wisdom and direction in every area of our lives. As we do, we will find, as C.S. Lewis did, that the more we depend on God, the less we need to worry, for He has already begun the work of salvation in us. This journey of faith is not about striving in our own strength, but about learning to trust in the one who holds all things in His hands. How might your life change if you truly believed that God is already at work in you, guiding every step? This is the essence of faith, a journey of trust, surrender, and ultimately, transformation.